Testing audio, 1, 2. Thank you for joining us on tonight, our very first ever virtual via Facebook Live and YouTube Live town hall. We're going to be discussing all things roadway safety tonight, and we are so lucky to be joined by the absolute experts in this field across the city of Winchester. We've got our Deputy City Manager of Public Health and Safety, John Piper, our Chief of Police, Amanda Behan, our Public Safety Administration Manager, Patrick Elwell, our Public Services Director, Perry Eisenach, and our Communications Director, Kit Redmer. My name's Sarah Fry. I'm the Public Information Officer for the City of Winchester, and I'm going to be your MC for the night, kind of leading us into the different presentations for the evening and doing some introductions along the way. I do encourage anybody that has questions, please just type them into the chat on Facebook or YouTube, and we will make sure that they make their way to the presenter and to the group at large. And we're going to make sure that as many questions as humanly possible get answered tonight on all of your questions around roadway safety in the city. So, without any further ado, I am going to hand the presentation over to our Deputy City Manager of Public Health and Safety, John Piper.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm also excited about this opportunity this evening, and I think this is going to be a great forum for us to continue to listen to our community members about what their concerns are. Certainly one of the biggest complaints and concerns that we hear from people in Winchester is about traffic safety, speeding, and pedestrian safety. So tonight, hopefully, will be a great opportunity for people in our community to learn more about some of the efforts that we're doing across the city to make sure that we're taking into account what people's concerns are. We're using the technology that's available and certainly our enforcement efforts to hopefully make Winchester a safer place, not only drive, but the technology that's available. And you know, I think we would all agree there's too many accidents in the city, and I know the chief's going to talk about that a little bit later in her presentation. And there's a lot of factors, some that we would expect, and perhaps some others that people would be surprised to learn that go into crashes here in Winchester. And most commonly, it's not people speeding. In fact, it's people being distracted while they're driving, doing things like eating or being on their cell phone or even shaving or putting on makeup going down the road. And until recently, some of our enforcement mechanisms along those lines of distracted driving were somewhat limited. So the police department brought forward an ordinance that was passed by City Council on November 28th. And that ordinance says, and it sounds kind of common sense to folks, but it says that the driver of a vehicle has to give full-time attention when they're operating a vehicle. So before, you know, the officers may charge somebody in an accident where distracted driving could be a factor with reckless driving, but this is now a more appropriate tool for them to use at the scene of an accident, but also hopefully to prevent accidents. I would say that, you know, we've all seen, just being drivers out on our roadway, we've all seen people engaged in unsafe behaviors. So there's a lot of other factors that go into driving as well, and that's some things you're also going to learn about later, and those are roadway designs, population, it's traffic flow. And so you're going to hear from some of the experts here tonight that are going to talk about some of the ongoing efforts that we have. The technology is an important part as we're moving into 2024. We want to make sure we're using technology to effectively keep our roadways safe, and you're going to learn shortly about some upcoming technology efforts that we're doing relating to speeding in school zones. And you're also going to learn about what some of the limitations are in Virginia about what localities can and can't do. So with that, I'll wrap up my comments and just welcome everybody this evening. I want to thank our panelists and those out in virtual land for participating tonight. And if you have any questions, please chat, and I'll be happy to jump in if I can.
Thank you so much, Mr. Piper. Next up, I am going to reshare my screen, and we are going to hand the reins over to Patrick Elwell, who is our Public Safety Administration Manager. Patrick is going to be talking with us today about school zone speed enforcement cameras. This is a new initiative for the city, and I know lots of people have had questions about them. So please feel free to chime in, type them in the feed, and we'll make sure that Patrick gets all of your questions. So yeah, without any further ado, I'm going to hand things over to Patrick.
Thank you, Sarah. Welcome, everybody. Hope you're having a good evening. I want to introduce, if you haven't already heard about this is a new program that we're excited to roll out soon. We don't have a definitive date for when these cameras will go live, but it will be soon. These are speed enforcement cameras that we are placing in several school zones in the city, and these cameras are going to be set up specifically to catch people who are speeding 10 miles an hour or over the posted speed limit in a school zone while the school zone lights are flashing. So this is going to be half an hour before school and half an hour after school lets out. Anytime you see those flashers going in the school zone, these cameras will be live, and hopefully they won't catch too many people, but we have a feeling that based on some of the information that we've gathered, these are some critical areas that we need some more enforcement, and these are a mechanism that we can use to act as a force multiplier for our police department to enforce speed limits in these school zones. So these cameras, what they'll do is if they detect a vehicle traveling 10 miles an hour or more over the speed limit in a school zone, it'll take a picture, actually 2 pictures of that vehicle. It will automatically read the license plate. It'll figure out who the registered owner is. It'll generate a citation, and that owner will get a citation in the mail once the police department reviews it and approves it to be sent out. So why are we using these cameras? I think the best way to articulate the why for this piece of technology is looking at school zones and why we have a specific area that we want to bring more attention to and have drivers pay more attention to while they're driving through these zones. Obviously, there's a high chance of children running around, trying to cross the street, trying to get to school, especially now that the schools have increased their walk zones. So school zones are already area of high vulnerability for pedestrian traffic, and as we know, speed and pedestrians don't mix well. This study by the NHTSA shows that pedestrians who are struck by a vehicle at 20 miles an hour are 2/3 less likely to be killed than a pedestrian struck by a vehicle traveling 30 or more miles an hour over the limit. So in our school zones throughout the city, speed limit is going to be 25 miles an hour. In most school zones, that's the speed limit anyway, except for one. And actually, this one that we have camera set up is going to be James Wood Middle School zone. Goes from 35 miles an hour down to 25 miles an hour. So these cameras are going to be looking for drivers who are going fast enough to raise that risk level for pedestrians. And the intent, obviously, is to get people to slow down, and people who are speeding and receive a citation act as a deterrent from doing that in the future. We have information from nationwide that shows that we can generally expect a 35% reduction in speeding infractions within the first year of these cameras rolling out. And that's due to the higher level of visibility, higher deterrence, and higher enforcement of these school zone speed limits. And if you could advance the slide for me. Thank you. So which school zones are we going to be placing these cameras in? We are starting with 3 school zones. John Kerr Elementary School on Meadow Branch Avenue, James Wood Middle School on Amherst Street, and Daniel Morgan Middle School on East Cork Street. So we're starting with these three. We may expand them to add the cameras to other school zones in the future once we do some more studies and we do some more evaluations. But these are the three we're starting with. And we selected these school zones because of the high level of traffic volume and violations that we have discovered after doing a speed study over the course of a 2-day period. In these three school zones alone, in 2 days, we registered almost 600 violations, and that's vehicles going 10 miles an hour or over during school zone times. So this is when the school zone flashing lights would be active. We're going more than 10 miles an hour over the limit. It's very unsafe. So these school zones were selected because of those numbers, and we hope to evaluate those a little bit after these cameras go live, and we expect to see a reduction, we hope, in violations. But these are all mechanisms that we're working with other components of traffic safety, which my colleagues will talk about in a little bit. And one more slide for me, Sarah. Yeah, so I've kind of already hit on how they work, but just to go over it again, drivers that are caught by these cameras, their registered owner of those vehicles will get the citation in the mail once the Winchester Police Department reviews them for accuracy, and actually a police officer will approve them to be sent out. So all these citations are issued by the police department. The vehicle owner will receive the citation, and they have 30 days to either pay the civil penalty or provide notice that they would like to appeal. And there's actually a couple of methods to appeal a citation depending on the situation. People who receive a citation can obviously appeal it in court, as is their right, and also provide an affidavit for instances in which their vehicle was stolen or sold at the time, and of course you have to provide proof of that, or somebody else was driving the vehicle, in which case in the affidavit the person cited would have to name who would be driving that vehicle at the time of the offense. So there's a couple of mechanisms for that, but it's all explained in the citation that is sent out to the registered owner. And sorry, I see we have a question.
Yes. So, Patrick, this question comes in from Dick Taylor, who has a couple of questions, actually. The first one is, can the stop signs be placed at eye level?
Sorry, the stop signs?
Yeah. So, Dick, if you can maybe give us a little bit more clarification on that in the chat, we'll be happy to readdress it again. But his next question was around if and when Hanley High School will be included in the school zones as well for the cameras.
So right now we are just rolling out these three school zones that I mentioned. We will be doing some extra studies, school zones throughout the city. We want to make sure that if we are going to put cameras in a school zone, that it's actually going to be necessary and be effective. We're not trying to throw cameras up everywhere, especially if they're not needed. So these the sites that we select will be based on speed studies that we conduct that show a need, that show that there are large amounts of violating vehicles during school zone times.
Thanks so much for that, Patrick. Dick was just commenting that he thinks the stop signs are kind of high. I guess, Perry, this may end up actually being a question for you. Is there some sort of regulation around the height of stop signs? You probably know that better than the rest of us.
So, good evening, everybody. Generally speaking, we keep the stop sign so the bottom of the sign is about 7 feet high, but we do have somewhat of flexibility on that. So if there's a specific sign that you're concerned about, let us know. We'll be happy to take a look at it. But generally, we don't want them too low so that people, a lot of the areas, they're kind of in sidewalk locations where people are walking. So we don't want people to walk into the sign. So, and we want them to be kind of uniform throughout the city, but we're happy to take a look at that.
Thanks, Perry.
All right, Sarah, and I think I have one more slide to go, and then I'll wrap up my piece.
Perfect. Thanks, Patrick.
So hit on a couple of these things, but these are frequently asked when these school zone cameras are implemented. They are authorized and regulated by the Virginia Code, and that code section on the screen there tells us exactly how they can be used, everything from when, where, what signage needs to be placed, how long the information is kept, everything like that is regulated by the state code. These citations are civil citations. They do not count as points against DMV licenses. All citations are issued by the Winchester Police Department and a Winchester police officer, even though the program itself is administered by a private company that the city has contracted with to provide the service. Citations will include instructions for how to send payment, or how to request a court date, or how to file affidavits for an appeal. The cameras will only be active during school zone times when the school zone lights are flashing. And once the cameras are ready to go, we're still working on getting them installed, but once we get them installed and they're live, there will be a brief warning period to provide notice to the public that these cameras are now live. And within that period, if a vehicle is captured on one of the cameras, they'll receive a warning instead of an actual citation. And that's just to, again, the entire point of this is to reduce these violations from occurring. So if that can be achieved by a warning in the brief period before or as the program starts, and help somebody save themselves a citation down the road, it's all the same benefit to the city. So we look forward to those cameras going live, and we look forward to experiencing a significant reduction in speeding in our school zones. I'm happy to take any other questions if you have any, Sarah.
Patrick, thank you so much for that. So we had a couple of people on here, and I think that, Perry, I might need you to jump back on for a second. We're jumping a little bit ahead in our comments, where some people are asking questions about specific areas they'd like to see stop signs, and maybe where some stop signs are kind of hidden by tree branches, things like that. So, Perry, could you maybe get into what happens to force the city, or what considerations does the city take when thinking about where to place a stop sign, and what are the actual criteria around it?
Sure. So certainly, if there's tree branches or things like that, we will certainly address that. So, people let us know. We're constantly out driving around, and when we see it, we try to address it. But that's always very important, is to make sure that the stop sign is visible. But as far as where we actually place stop signs, there are criteria that are defined. We use, it's called the Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices. And that's used by jurisdictions all across the United States, so that we are consistent in the way that we put up signs, here, same in other states, so that wherever you drive in the United States, there's consistency. But there are certain criteria that we do look at. We do not put stop signs up to slow down traffic. I think that's one of the biggest requests that we get, is people want traffic to slow down on their street, so they want a stop sign put up. That is not a criteria that we use to slow down traffic. So stop signs are put up if there's a lot of accidents at an intersection. And within the city here, probably the biggest reason that we would install stop signs and make an intersection an all-way stop is because of sight distance limitations. So if you're stopped at a stop sign and the street in front of you doesn't have to stop, but you can't see that traffic until it's right in front of you because the sight distance is not good enough, that would be a reason to put up a stop sign. And we have installed a lot of all-way stops in the past 10 years, and sight distance limitations has been the single biggest reason that we do that.
All right, perfect. So I have another question that this one I think is going to be for you, Chief Behan. So Perry, you're off the hook now. All right, Chief. Dick Taylor is back with another question around, can you define what the law considers complying with a stop sign? He says it seems like most people roll through stop signs and never come to a full stop.
Yeah, you're required to come to a full stop. I think it's, I think it was referred to many years ago as a California stop, and that is definitely not permissible.
So is that rule that I learned in driver's ed where when you come to a stop, you should be able to say STOP in your head before you go on the gas again?
I like it.
Okay, all right, that was always my rule of thumb. All right. Well, if we don't have any more questions for Patrick around the school zone speed enforcement cameras, we are actually going to hand things over to Chief Amanda Behan of Winchester PD, and she's going to be going over traffic enforcement and crash overviews. So Winchester PD has a lot of really just fantastic initiatives around not just speed enforcement, but traffic enforcement in general, trying to bring down the crash rates. So I'm going to hand things over to Chief Behan and let her tell you all of those great things that the PD is doing.
Thank you, Sarah. Sarah, I'm happy to be here and share the information for sure. So we'll go on into the introduction slide. It's going to be the next one.
Sorry.
There we go. So the Winchester Police Department has issued 5,617 citations and written warnings year to date, which averages to 510 citations per month. And currently we are responding to 90 crashes per month. And when we say the word crash, we mean ones that are anywhere from a light fender bender to a more significant one. And in addition to this, on a weekly basis, we receive concerns from citizens regarding speeding and other traffic infractions occurring throughout the city. And we definitely appreciate the feedback and information so that we can set up directed patrols in those areas. But we have made it a goal for this year and years moving forward that we have to reduce crashes in the city of Winchester. So I think this is really important for our community to be aware of. The map that you're seeing is identifying crash locations in 2023. The yellow that you see indicates where most crashes are occurring. The darker red indicates a high crash zone, and the lighter red to blue indicates a low number of crashes. So what you're seeing in the yellow area is a lot centered around the Pleasant Valley Road. So we wanted to do a year-to-date crash comparison because we are trying to reduce those crashes from year to year. In 2022, from year to date, it was 1,011, and we have reduced it to 983 so far. I recognize that 3% doesn't seem like a large figure, but studies show that it takes up to 3 years to make a significant impact in reducing crashes. So after evaluating our crash data near the beginning of 2023, we began to increase our enforcement of the crash data from 2022. At the beginning of 2023, we wanted to increase our enforcement efforts in the high crash zones. So what this slide indicates is that in 2022 on North Pleasant Valley Road, we issued 180 citations, written and a warning, a citation or a warning. And then the number is up to 257 in 2023. And you'll see as you go down that we have significantly increased our traffic enforcement and the issue of citations and warnings in the areas of South Pleasant Valley Road, Berryville Avenue. So we are up, and it's astonishing, 40% of enforcement efforts and citations being issued in those high crash areas. So I do want to talk about that last slide, because what data I don't have for you is what our crashes look like in those high crash areas. So at the end of 2023, going into the first part of 2024, we will be doing an analysis to see how well we did in our high crash areas. So the areas in which the crashes are occurring, and you'll see that on that map, are difficult to enforce due to the high volume of traffic, and there's no location for our officers to observe safely. Last week, we reported through our social media page that we took a different approach at these intersections, and we actually positioned our personnel in safe locations, and they called out any observations of the traffic enforcement, and we strategically placed officers in away from the intersections in safer locations. So once it was called out, they could safely conduct a traffic stop. And it was remarkable, the results that we had from that. We were able to issue in a 4-hour time frame over 30 traffic citations and warnings, and when you look at the number of our time spent on that in comparison to a directive patrol that we will receive for a single location, we have issued a lot more citations in these high crash areas, far above what we are issuing on some of the areas in which we're conducting our traditional 30-minute directive patrol. In the future, we will be reporting on our where the crashes are occurring, so our citizens and visitors can go into our website, the city's website, and be able to actually filter out locations where crashes are occurring. They can see where our traffic enforcement is happening. In addition, I'm excited that we're going to be able to put where incidents are occurring, arrests, and also where our DUIs are occurring.
Chief Behan, that is so fantastic. I think that everybody should be so happy with all of the new initiatives that are coming up.
Yes.
And I love the dashboards. It's just great to kind of be
Yes.
able to see that data in real life. I do just want to pause for a second to see if we have any questions from our friends over on YouTube or on Facebook. Don't be shy. How often do you get a chance to ask questions in the undivided attention of the Chief of Police? So feel free to bring them in. So we did have one question from Facebook around what can citizens do to help the police department in enforcement of speed laws and stop signs? Like, does it help if they call in? What's the best way for them to kind of help you guys out?
You know, I love this question because I had a really good conversation with someone this week about it. I think, you know, if you as a neighbor, you know, or as a citizen and your neighbors are talking about this, then we know that we need to take a deeper dive into it. So we always welcome feedback from the community, especially when you have a group of folks coming together and they want change and they want to make their community a lot safer. So we encourage that feedback. We don't want to have our community members get to a point that they're so frustrated and they feel like we're not doing anything. Sometimes we just aren't aware. We have our data that drives the direction that we take our enforcement. And, I just ask for patience. We have typically only 6 to 8 officers working during the daytime hours. And so when you look at a city that has over 300 streets, it's very difficult for us. In addition, we're responding to 3,000 calls for service a month. We just ask for some patience and time for us to do a true evaluation of what we're seeing as far as traffic infractions in that specific area.
That's great. One follow-up for that. This one is from me. What's the best way to get in touch with the police department to kind of report some of those things? Do you want them to call the non-emergency number? Is there an email address they should be getting in touch with?
Yeah, there is a standard email address that they can send us an email, and I think it's just Winchester Police at winchesterva.gov. It is on our website, but those emails will come directly to my office, and so we'll be able to push the information out to our patrol folks so they can start doing these directed patrols. We keep a log of our expectations whenever something comes in. So if we are receiving a high number of complaints, then we provide them with that information, and then they have to report back to us on that.
That's fantastic. I've got a couple more questions from the Facebook side. One of them is, why is the intersection of Berryville Avenue and Pleasant Valley Road just so crash prone?
I don't know. Well, I don't know that I can answer for that specific one, but what we're seeing, and Deputy City Manager Piper spoke on this as well, is it is the distracted driving, and it's the desire to get to locations fast. They're distracted by what they're, whatever they may be doing, looking at, thinking, and that's what we're seeing. Those distracted behaviors lead to persons running red lights, and that's a huge one for intersections. We're seeing that mostly, and it's not yielding.
That's really helpful information. We've got our first YouTube question from Steve Policastro, who is a member of Bike Walk Winchester. So his question is, do you have any statistics around bike and pedestrian involved accidents in the city?
I would be happy to report on that. I don't have it right in front of me. I do know that our numbers are low, and traditionally it's somewhere between 1 to 5 pedestrian and bike-related accidents per year.
Oh, wow, that's much lower than I would have ever expected. Well, that's great news. One last question from Facebook is a question around, what do you think we can continue to do or start doing to get Winchester a reputation as a city that holds people accountable, and if you are distracted driving, if you are speeding, you will get a ticket, you will be fined?
That is another really great question. We are certainly doing our part to take strict enforcement actions to reduce crashes. I think, that as you can educate and talk to your neighbors, talk to your family members, make sure that they're driving safely. It's easy to, get in your thoughts and drive down the road because you're thinking of the place that you're going to, instead of paying attention, and you're going a little bit faster than you should be, and you're really not paying attention to, what's coming ahead. So it's really, you have to go back to what I learned in driver's ed, and that's to be a defensive driver. You have to be aware. When I drive, I am constantly looking ahead, looking to what's behind me, beside me, and really staying focused. I think if I could share any message, that would be the best advice that I could give.
That's fantastic. I don't see any other questions coming through for right now, but just remember, if anything pops into your head, Chief Behan's going to be with us through the rest of the session. Thank you so much, Chief Behan. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Sarah.
Next up, we are going to introduce our Director of Public Services, Perry Eisenach. Perry is a pretty smart guy when it comes to the rules and regulations of what it takes to have a walkable city and traffic engineering our roads to make them as safe as possible. At the end of the day, Perry is still an engineer. Don't let him tell you any different. So with no further ado, I'm going to pass things off to Mr. Eisenach.
Thank you, Sarah. I think you're giving giving me more credit than I probably deserve, but I'll take it whenever I can get it. So I'm going to talk about a couple things tonight. So if we go to the next slide, the first I want to talk about speed limits. That's often a topic of discussion among all the drivers within the city. So the default speed limit on city streets is 25 miles per hour. And that's actually defined in state code. It's also reaffirmed in city code. But any speed limits other than 25 miles per hour have to be approved by city council. And so whenever we look to change a speed limit, we follow the criteria. I mentioned this earlier this evening, this manual on uniform traffic control devices. That's what we follow, that's what we look at to complete an engineering study. And so we look at different things like how many curves the road has, how much sight distance there is, how many driveway entrances intersect with the street. All those are taken into account when we come back and make a recommendation on what the speed limit should be. Now, council has recently taken some action. Just last week, they approved lowering the speed limit on the majority of Middle Road from 35 miles an hour down to 25 miles an hour. And there are a lot of streets up on the north end of the city that are very narrow. A lot of them have cars parked on the sides of the road, and they just don't lend themselves to really driving safely at 25 miles per hour. So council approved lowering the speed limit on several of those streets up on the north end to 15 miles an hour. So over the next month or so, you will start seeing new speed limit signs go up in those locations. So next slide. I'll talk a little bit about a walkable city, because certainly we want people to be able to walk anywhere in the city. We want them to feel safe doing so. And sidewalks are definitely one of the highest priorities for our residents and for city council. And unfortunately, we do have a lot of streets in the city that do not currently have sidewalks. So we do have a sidewalk master plan, and this plan prioritizes locations for new sidewalks. Right now, we are currently working on the design for two big projects to install new sidewalks. One is on Middle Road, and the other is on Paper Mill Road down in the southeast part of the city. So we're working on that. Certainly the Green Circle Trail is very important for making the city walkable, and we are currently working on the design of we call it the final section of the primary trail that will be along Jubal Early and Featherbed Lane. And we hope to start construction on that project by the end of next calendar year. So sidewalks are definitely a priority, and we're trying to construct them as quickly as we reasonably can with the funding limitations that we have. So then the last thing I wanted to talk about tonight was traffic calming. So we get a lot of complaints from residents about speeding. That's probably, at least in my department, that's probably the biggest complaint that we receive, is from residents that complain about people speeding in their neighborhood. We think one of the most effective things that we can do to install actual infrastructure or physical measures to slow people down are what we call raised crosswalks or speed tables. So we are really focusing our efforts on that right now. just within the past month, we installed 4 of these raised crosswalks on Harvest Drive. And so if you haven't driven Harvest Drive recently, I would encourage you to do that. We've already received very positive comments from that neighborhood that it has made a difference in slowing people down. And that's what we want. So we took a proposal to City Council where we are going to install an additional 41 of these raised crosswalks throughout the city, primarily in school walk zones. So we have started that, and over the next couple of months, hopefully we don't get any majorly cold, snowy weather, we will get those crosswalks installed. But I think once those go in, we will look at other areas of the city that might make sense to be good candidates to install these raised crosswalks. Because I think once they go in, people are really going to see how effective they are, and they're going to want them in their neighborhood. And we're not going to be able to install them on every street in the city, but we will prioritize where they go in. So.
Well, Perry, I've actually got a question about the raised crosswalks or speed tables. So, Harry Pauling, I'm just going to read his message. It was before you started talking about them, but I think it's going to help you kind of answer his overarching question. So he said, plans are approved to add over 39 speed bumps. I object to the bumps on Meadow Branch. There are traffic lights at each end, plus stop signs at Hanley and Mahone. That should be enough to slow the drivers. Please don't mess up the pristine boulevard in the city. Can you kind of talk about why that location was chosen and the difference between these raised crosswalk speed tables and an actual speed bump?
Yeah, so we do not install speed bumps. We call them speed tables or raised crosswalks. And so a speed bump is typically what you might see on private property at a shopping center, in a parking area, where you really have to slow down to maybe a couple miles per hour to go over a speed bump. A raised crosswalk or speed table, you need to slow down, but you don't have to. You can still maintain a reasonable driving speed to go over there. Now, as far as Meadow Branch, we certainly want to hear your comments on that. I know putting them on major streets will draw a lot of comments, but we receive a tremendous number of complaints from the Meadow Branch area about speed. And the Green Circle Trail runs along Meadow Branch Avenue. We have the John Kerr Elementary School, and so that's why we feel it's a good location to put some of these raised crosswalks.
Thanks for that, Perry. As a follow-up, we have another person on Facebook, Mary, who had a question about the raised crosswalk this is a very specific one, on the corner of Wentworth and Beechcroft, which you may or may not be aware of. So I'm going to let you mentally catalog all of the streets in Winchester really quick. She's saying that turning traffic, having to go over the raised crosswalk is kind of hard on their suspension. Is there any thought as to how close they go to intersections, things like that, especially with turns?
Some of them will be placed at intersections because that's where the crosswalk is. We like raised crosswalks where not only do they serve the purpose of slowing traffic down, but also it raises the crosswalk up so people that are crossing the street, it makes them more visible. So you will see several of these new raised crosswalks will be installed at intersections.
I think that makes a lot of sense. It's just something people have to get used to as they're learning to
Right.
drive around them. In that same vein, not a question that's been asked tonight, but one that I've had people ask me when they heard about it is, how do emergency vehicles handle the raised crosswalks? And I'm going to ask Chief Behan to jump in here if she has any opinions on that as well.
We do get this question a lot, and I think a lot more the fire department gets asked of this. There is a indication of the crosswalk. We know that they're coming up. They're very visible to us. And our officers know that these raised crosswalks are out there. Our response times to incidents is in the city of Winchester is very low. I mean, not low is the right word, sorry for that, but we get there pretty quickly. So the raised crosswalks really are not going to slow our response times. The city of Winchester, 9.2 square miles. Our officers are assigned to various wards throughout the city to reduce the response time to calls for service.
Thank you for that, Chief. All right, Perry, another question just for you, not related to speed tables. This is one that came in earlier during your presentation. So are Winchester's traffic lights at main intersections reactive to cars or not? They're talking about lots of long wait times on lights to turn green with no traffic coming the other way. And for a very specific example, traffic backing up on 81 South to Jubal Early when the light doesn't change. So kind of that Jubal Early and Millwood Avenue and Pleasant Valley Road intersection and the lights.
Yeah, so that's a difficult location. Traffic has always been bad there. We are going to be doing a project along with VDOT in the next, I think construction is slated to start in 2025. But VDOT is going to be replacing the bridge on Millwood Pike over Interstate 81. And when that happens, the city's part of the project is we are going to remove the signal light at Millwood and Mall Boulevard. And when we do that, you will not be able to make left turns into and out of Mall Boulevard. But by taking that signal light out, that will greatly improve traffic flow on Millwood. It will be a noticeable difference. And so we're excited that that's going to be coming in the next couple of years. But yes, traffic lights do sense traffic. It depends on the location. Sometimes of the day, we operate our traffic signals in what we call free mode, so there's not a timing plan. But certain times of the day, especially on the busy corridors, there are timing plans. So sometimes on the side streets, you do have to wait a while because we want to keep traffic progressing down the main corridors without having to stop too much. It's a balance, and it's not always easy to get the right balance.
I am sure that's a job that I never want to have. So thank you for putting that much time and thought into it. All right. So I think those are the last of our questions specifically around Perry's portion of the presentation, but I'm going to ask everybody else that's presented this evening to go ahead and come back on screen with us and see if there are any other questions for the whole group. I know I've got at least one that I'm going to pose to everybody in general. So come on back and we'll see what you guys have to say. So the first one is one that probably a lot of us have had thoughts of, but probably not one that anybody here can speak to specifically, but I'm going to go ahead and ask it. So are there any plans to create some sort of refresher course for drivers? Many people haven't seen the inside of a driver's education classroom in 10 to 20 years and may need to be reminded of the rules of the road, like when to yield and how to drive through a traffic circle.
I'd like to respond to that, Sarah. I think in theory this would be incredible if we could do some sort of refresher course, but it's, we can't mandate someone through this, by the city government to go through that. This question gets brought up often at community events that I attend, whether it be, getting a refresher on driving, getting a refresher on riding bicycles. The problem is getting people to attend. I think that the more conversations that people can have with one another will help our community be safer.
Oh, I think what we would all wish that everybody would go to those optional trainings. Oh, if only. Just like we wish everybody came to our town halls. Go ahead, Mr. Piper.
I was going to say, there's also opportunities particularly for younger drivers, if they get caught with a minor traffic infraction. Sometimes the courts will order that too, and then people can proactively go and take driver improvement classes that can positively impact their driving record with DMV. I know that's something that folks do. So there are private companies out there as well.
Oh, that's a great call out too. All right. So I'm going to put out the call again to everybody watching us on Facebook and YouTube. This is a great opportunity to get to ask questions to the people that enforce the laws, help create new initiatives within the city, decide where your stop signs and speed tables are going. All of those really great questions. So let us know what you have to ask. Otherwise, is there anything else the group here wants to share with everybody who's watching? Anything we didn't cover, something that popped into your head as somebody else was presenting? Oh.
I would just like to add that this has been a great opportunity, messaging from the city's perspective to our community. I certainly hope that those who are watching tonight spread the word and take the time to share it, and so we can have other members of our community educated on what we're trying to accomplish.
Absolutely. Well, I want to thank all of you for joining us tonight. It's been an absolute pleasure. I think this has been a great first foray into our Facebook Live and YouTube Live Town Hall style. Perry, I do have one question that I'm going to ask you that came from Miss Darlene Walker. And hers is about the placement of existing stop signs and what kind of the process is to get them moved. Specifically, the one on Southwark is cumbersome, and when turning off Cameron, sometimes when going straight, if cars are parked on the street, you just can't see it. Any thoughts or questions around that, or what kind of steps people can take to also report things like this?
Just, let us, we'll be happy to take a look at that specific location. Sometimes there are ways that we can adjust it to make the stop sign more visible. And when we can do that, we've done that multiple times in the past. So we're happy to take a look at any specific location.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe there's an email address, publicservices@winchesterva.gov.
That sounds correct.
So if you have any specific concerns, feel free to reach out to Perry that way. There's another little known secret. You can reach out to any of us on screen that you see here tonight with our first name our last name at winchesterva.gov. We all like to talk to residents. We all love talking to residents, hearing what your concerns are. So please don't be afraid to reach out to us. But if you have anything specific about tonight, too, that you really wanted to dig deeper in, John Piper, our Deputy City Manager, has very graciously offered to take any of those questions or concerns that you may have. So if anything continues to come up or something pops into your head later that you go, man, I really wish I had asked that during the town hall on Facebook or on YouTube, you can reach him at john.piper@winchesterva.gov. So I hope to hear that he gets at least a few emails from some of you guys over the rest of this week. All right. If I don't see any other questions coming in, once again, thank you so much to our presenters tonight. We really appreciate you guys taking the time to talk to our residents and kind of explain everything that we're doing to keep Winchester's roadways as safe as possible and to really create that kind of a walkable city for this students, especially in our expanded walk zones. So thank you all so much for joining us. And for everybody watching on Facebook and YouTube, we really appreciate you. When citizens are involved and residents are asking questions, that's great. We love to see that. We can't do better if we don't know what's bothering you. So please never be afraid to reach out, and hopefully you can join us at another virtual town hall in the future. And I did see one last question come in asking if there's a second round of leaf collection, and yes, there is. That one I can answer for you. They should be starting that second round in the next couple of weeks. But you can always look for updates at winchesterva.gov/leaf collection.
Sarah, I did have one more thing. I apologize. You had a great closure there, but I did not provide the correct email address. And so before we left, I wanted to be able to do that. So the email address to report things is police@winchesterva.gov.
All right. We've given out lots of email addresses, but at the end of the day, if you do have a question, just remember John Piper is happy to hear from you at john.piper@winchesterva.gov as well. So without anything else, thank you all so much for joining us, and we hope that we see you at our next in-person or virtual town hall. Thanks, everybody.